14 million Americans spent last Christmas completely alone. But for one paramedic, a routine holiday wellness check would reveal the most surprising case of all. The billionaire CEO of the city's largest company was sitting in her $20 million penthouse with absolutely no one. What he did next, with just his 6-year-old daughter and a pair of scissors, would ignite a response that brought an entire city to tears. This is the story of two people from opposite ends of the city. Leo Vance, a single-dad paramedic working the holiday shift, and Evelyn Thorne, the reclusive genius who built a billion-dollar tech empire. Their worlds were never meant to collide. But on that Christmas Eve, a simple call would force a single, haunting question into the open. In a city of millions, how can someone with everything end up with absolutely nothing? Leo Vance's world operated on a schedule measured in seconds. As a paramedic for Metro City EMS, his shifts were 12 hours of controlled chaos, where the difference between life and death was often the 90 seconds it took to reach a scene. At 34, he had been doing this for 11 years. He lived in a small, 2-bedroom apartment in the Brenner Heights neighborhood with his 6-year-old daughter, Chloe. His wife, Maria, had died from a sudden cardiac arrhythmia when Chloe was just 3, leaving Leo with a crushing grief and the sole responsibility of raising their daughter on a paramedic's salary of $58,000 a year. Every decision was calculated. Daycare versus rent. New boots for winter versus fixing the car's heater. Taking extra holiday shifts meant time and a half pay, which meant Christmas presents under the tree. So when the schedule for December came out, Leo volunteered for the Christmas Eve overnight shift, 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. He would celebrate with Chloe on Christmas morning. It was the compromise of a single parent who had no other choice. The statistics around Leo's profession are stark. Emergency medical responders are 3 times more likely than the general public to experience depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress. They witness human suffering at its most raw and vulnerable, and then they clock out and go buy groceries. For Leo, the compartmentalization was a survival skill. He kept a photo of Maria and Chloe taped inside his locker, a touchstone to the reason he endured the daily trauma. His partner on the ambulance, Anya Chen, had worked with him for 5 years. She knew when to talk and when to let the silence of the cab after a bad call just sit between them. On the afternoon of December 24th, they were running calls back-to-back. A slip and fall on ice, an elderly man with chest pains, a minor kitchen fire. The city was buzzing with last-minute errands and festive stress. At 4 p.m., Leo dropped Chloe at his sister's house for their makeshift Christmas Eve. He knelt to hug her, her small arms tight around his neck. "You'll be here when I wake up," she asked, her voice muffled against his uniform jacket. "I promise," he said, kissing the top of her head. The lie felt like a stone in his stomach. 22 miles away and 800 vertical feet in the air, Evelyn Thorne's world existed in a different dimension of pressure. At 38, she was the founder and CEO of Etha Systems, a quantum computing firm she had started in her Stanford dorm room. The company's valuation had just crossed $11 billion. Her personal net worth was estimated at $2.4 billion. She lived in the pinnacle suite of the Aurora Tower, a penthouse that spanned the entire top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic, dizzying view of the city and the river beyond. The space was an exercise in minimalist perfection: polished concrete floors, furniture that looked like sculpture, a kitchen with appliances never used. It was not a home. It was a trophy case for a life that had been entirely consumed by work. Evelyn's isolation was not an accident. It was the calculated cost of her ascent. She had pioneered a revolutionary data encryption chip, securing patents that made her company a fortress. But the process had burned through personal relationships. Her parents had passed away years ago. A long-term relationship with a venture capitalist had ended 2 years prior, a casualty of competing empires and mutual exhaustion. Her inner circle consisted of her chief operating officer, David Reed, and her security detail. She was the subject of constant media profiles that marveled at her genius and her reclusiveness in equal measure, often framing her as the ghost in the machine. What those profiles never mentioned was the diagnosis her private doctor had given her 6 months earlier: severe burnout, coupled with situational depression. The Surgeon General had declared loneliness a national epidemic, noting it carried health risks equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Evelyn Thorne, in her billion-dollar Aerie, was a perfect, silent case study. The mechanism that would bring these two orbits into collision was a protocol known as a wellness check. In Metro City, if a concerned friend, family member, or employee could not reach someone and feared for their safety, they could request police or EMS to perform a welfare check. At 6:45 p.m. on Christmas Eve, Evelyn's COO, David Reed, made that call. He had been trying to reach her since noon to confirm details for a mandatory board call scheduled for December 26th. She hadn't answered her phone, her direct line, or her secure messaging portal. This was unusual even for Evelyn. David knew she had canceled all her holiday plans and had explicitly said she wanted to be alone, but a gnawing worry made him dial the non-emergency line. The call was triaged, and due to the high-profile subject and lack of explicit medical emergency, routed to the EMS non-critical queue as a wellness check, code 2. No lights, no sirens. Dispatch came over Leo and Anya's terminal at 7:18 p.m. just as they were finishing a coffee. Medic 14 respond to Aurora Tower, penthouse level, for a welfare check. Contact name is David Reed. Party is a 38-year-old female, no reported symptoms, non-responsive to calls. Anya keyed the mic. Medic 14, copy, ETA 10 minutes. She looked at Leo. Billionaire Row, you ever been up there? Leo shook his head, navigating the ambulance into the festive traffic. Nope, bet they have great views of the rest of us working. The tone was light, but both paramedics felt the slight tension that came with any call involving wealth and status. The protocols were the same, but the atmosphere never was. They arrived at the Aurora Tower at 7:32. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and silent opulence, dominated by a massive, undecorated Christmas tree made of frosted glass and white LED lights. It was stunning and utterly cold. A security director in a tailored suit met them and escorted them to a private elevator, using a biometric key to activate the Penthouse Express car. The ascent was silent and swift. Leo felt the pressure change in his ears. The elevator doors opened not into a hallway but directly into the penthouse's foyer. The space was vast, illuminated only by the city lights sprawling beyond the windows. The air was still and slightly cool. There was no scent of food, no music, no indicator of life. In the center of the great room, silhouetted against the glittering skyline, sat Evelyn Thorne. She was on a large, low sofa, wearing sweatpants and an oversized cream sweater. She was simply staring out the window. There was no Christmas tree, no decorations, no wrapped gifts. On the granite counter of the kitchen island, Leo's trained eye spotted an empty wine glass and an unopened bottle of water. The scene violated every expectation of what a billionaire's Christmas should look like. It was just empty. Anya took the lead, her voice professionally warm. Ms. Thorne, I'm Anya, this is Leo. We're with Metro EMS. Your colleague David Reed asked us to check on you. Are you feeling okay tonight? Evelyn turned slowly. Her face was pale, her auburn hair down and unstyled. Her eyes were clear but hollow, the kind of empty that comes from profound exhaustion, not confusion. I'm fine, she said, her voice quiet but even. You can go, thank you. Standard procedure would be to ask a few basic medical questions, confirm she was alert and oriented, and then clear the call. Their job was to assess medical need, not emotional state. But Leo didn't move. He was looking past her at the absolute stillness of the penthouse. He thought of his own cramped, chaotic apartment, currently filled with the cardboard gingerbread house kit he and Chloe would assemble the next day. He thought of the 14 million Americans the news said would be alone tonight. The statistic had a face now, and it was sitting in the most expensive room in the city. Anya was already making a note on her tablet. All right, Ms. Thorne, We just need to have you verbally confirm you're refusing further assessment, and then we'll be on our—" Leo interrupted, his voice softer than he intended. "Ma'am, is there anyone you'd like us to call for you?" Evelyn looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. A flicker of something, pain, embarrassment, weariness passed over her features. She shook her head once, a barely perceptible movement. "No," she whispered, "there's no one to call." And in that moment, Leo Vance made a decision that would break every protocol he had ever followed. He turned to his partner. "Anya, clear the call, I'm staying." Anya Chen stared at her partner like he'd just spoken in a foreign language. "Leo, you can't stay. We cleared the call. This is a private residence." Her voice was a hissed whisper, the professionalism battling sheer disbelief. Leo kept his eyes on Evelyn, who had now drawn her knees up to her chest on the sofa, looking smaller than anyone with that much power should ever look. "I'm off the clock in 20 minutes, Leo said, more to Evelyn than to Anya. "I'm staying as a person, not a paramedic." He turned to Anya, his expression pleading for understanding. "Take the rig back. Log me out. I'll get a cab or something later." Anya shook her head, but the fight left her. She had worked too many years with Leo not to recognize the look of stubborn, quiet determination that meant he would not be moved. It was the same look he got when a patient was crashing and he refused to stop working them. With a final, worried glance, she retreated to the elevator. The soft asterisk ding and the whisper of closing doors left a profound silence in the penthouse. Leo slowly removed his heavy winter coat and his utility belt, placing them on a sleek, barren side table. He stood there in his navy blue uniform pants and a simple gray t-shirt, suddenly feeling like an intruder in a museum. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "That was unprofessional. My name is Leo Vance." Evelyn didn't move for a long moment. Then she spoke without turning from the window. "Why are you still here, Leo Vance? Is this a pity check?" "Because I assure you the company health plan is quite comprehensive." The words were sharp, a defense mechanism honed by years of boardroom battles. Leo walked slowly into the room, not toward her but toward the kitchen island. He picked up the unopened bottle of water. "It's not pity," he said, opening the bottle and taking a sip. "It's recognition. I've seen that look before, on people who are physically trapped in wrecked cars, on people who have just gotten a terminal diagnosis. It's the look of someone who thinks they have to face the avalanche alone." He put the bottle down. "And on Christmas Eve, that's a crappy way to feel." Evelyn finally turned to look at him, her guard momentarily down, replaced by raw curiosity. "What do you suggest? A game of chess? A festive movie?" The sarcasm was brittle. Leo smiled, a genuine, warm smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Actually, I was thinking of making a grilled cheese sandwich. Your kitchen looks like it's never met food. It's an insult to appliances." A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Evelyn's lips. "I have bread, I think, and cheese somewhere." It was the first crack in the fortress wall. For the next hour, Leo Vance performed a kind of gentle, domestic archaeology. He found a loaf of artisanal sourdough in the back of a stainless steel fridge stocked with mineral water and pre-made salads. He discovered a block of aged cheddar in a drawer. He rummaged through immaculate cabinets until he found a pan. The act of cooking, the sizzle of butter, the smell of toasting bread and melting cheese, began to thaw the sterile atmosphere of the penthouse. Evelyn watched from a stool at the island, silent at first, then asking small questions. "You cook for your daughter?" "Every day I'm not burning grilled cheese, yeah," Leo replied, flipping the sandwich with a practiced flick of his wrist. He plated the golden, crispy sandwich, cut it diagonally, and pushed a plate toward her. They ate in a silence that was no longer uncomfortable. Afterward, Leo's phone buzzed. It was a text from his sister, a photo of Chloe already in her Christmas pajamas, fast asleep on the couch. He showed the picture to Evelyn. "My daughter, Chloe." Evelyn stared at the sleeping girl's face, her expression unreadable. Then she did something that surprised them both. She asked, would she be awake? "Could I say hello?" Leo hesitated, then FaceTimed his sister. His sister answered, confused, but handed the phone to a just-woken, bleary-eyed Chloe. "Hey, sweetie," Leo said softly. "I'm with a new friend. Her name is Evelyn. She doesn't have any Christmas decorations at her house. Can you believe that, Chloe, ever the empathetic soul, was scandalized? No decorations, that's so sad, she exclaimed, her sleepiness forgot. Evelyn, visibly nervous, leaned into the frame. Hello, Chloe. Hi. You need paper ornaments. Daddy, we should go make her some. We have the sparkly paper. Chloe's solution was immediate and earnest. And in that moment, Leo made his second protocol-shattering decision of the night. You know what, Bug? That's a great idea. Tell Auntie I'm coming to get you, okay? 45 minutes later, Leo returned to the Aurora Tower penthouse, this time holding the hand of a 6-year-old girl in red footy pajamas, carrying a bag from a 24-hour convenience store. It contained construction paper, child-safe scissors, a glue stick, and a box of markers. Chloe walked in, her eyes wide as saucers at the view. Then she focused on Evelyn, who was standing awkwardly by the sofa. Chloe marched right up to her. We're gonna fix your Christmas, she announced. What followed was a transformation not of the penthouse, but of the people in it. Chloe commandeered the massive concrete coffee table as her art studio. She taught Evelyn how to fold paper to cut out snowflakes. Leo found a forgotten Bluetooth speaker and connected his phone, playing a playlist of gentle Christmas music. The sterile space filled with the sounds of scissors snipping, Chloe's cheerful narration, and occasional, genuine laughter. Evelyn Thorne, billionaire CEO, spent an hour on the floor, carefully coloring a paper star yellow. Leo watched as the hollow look in her eyes gradually softened, replaced by a focus so pure it was childlike itself. At one point, Chloe held up a lopsided glitter-glued ornament. This one is for you, 'cause you're the star of the company, right? Evelyn took it, her hand trembling slightly. She looked from the paper star to Chloe's beaming face and then to Leo, who gave a small, encouraging nod. A single tear escaped, tracing a path down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. It's perfect, she whispered, her voice thick. Thank you. They strung the paper creations along the line of the kitchen island using spare tape. It was a pathetic, beautiful, humble little display. But for the first time that night, the penthouse felt inhabited. It felt like a place where people existed, not just resided. As midnight approached, Chloe fell asleep curled on the sofa under Leo's paramedic coat. Leo and Evelyn sat on the floor, leaning against it, surrounded by paper scraps. The city lights twinkled below, a silent witness. You didn't have to do this, Evelyn said quietly, staring at the sleeping child. Any of it, Leo nodded. I know, but I've learned something in my job. The crisis isn't always the heart attack or the car crash. Sometimes the crisis is the silence that comes after everyone leaves. Sometimes the most critical care is just showing up. Evelyn was silent for a long time. Then she spoke, her voice so low he almost didn't hear it. My father died on Christmas Eve, 5 years ago. Heart attack, alone in his office. I was in Singapore closing a deal. I've hated this day ever since. I just wanted it to be over. The confession hung in the air, explaining the empty penthouse, the isolation, the profound sadness. Leo didn't offer platitudes. He simply said, That's a terrible weight to carry, I'm sorry. The night ended quietly. Leo gathered a sleeping Chloe into his arms. Evelyn walked them to the elevator. As the doors opened, she suddenly said, Wait. She disappeared and returned a moment later, holding the yellow paper star Chloe had made. She carefully pinned it to the front of Leo's jacket over his heart. So you don't forget, she said, her eyes glistening. Leo smiled. I won't. The elevator doors closed, separating their worlds once more. Leo drove home through the silent, snowy streets, his daughter asleep in the back, a paper star on his chest. He assumed that was the end of it, a strange, beautiful, secret Christmas Eve. But the universe had other plans, because someone had been watching. The next morning, Christmas Day, at 9:17 a.m., a grainy, zoomed-in photograph was posted to a local community gossip forum called Metro Eyes. The photo was taken from another high-rise building several blocks away. It showed a dimly lit penthouse interior. In the center of the frame, clear enough to be identifiable, was Evelyn Thorne sitting on the floor. Beside her was a man in a paramedic's uniform shirt, and between them, a small child. They were surrounded by paper crafts. The caption read, SIGHTING, is the Ice Queen melting? Billionaire Evelyn Thorne's very unusual Christmas Eve guests, a paramedic and a kid. What's the story here? The post garnered a few curious comments at first. Then a user with the handle First Responder Truth commented, "That's Leo Vance from Metro EMS. Good guy, worked the overnight. Why was he off duty in the Aurora Tower penthouse?" The question was a spark in dry tinder. By noon, the post had been screenshotted and shared to larger social media platforms. The image was compelling precisely because it was so inexplicable. The stark contrast between the luxurious, empty setting and the simple, domestic scene of paper ornaments created a narrative vacuum, and the internet rushed to fill it. Theories exploded. Was it a secret family, a medical emergency, a charity stunt? At 1 p.m., a tech blogger with a significant following reposted it with the headline, "AETHER CEO's Christmas Mystery. Has Evelyn Thorne finally crashed?" The word crashed implied a mental health crisis, and with that the story metastasized from curious gossip to a full-blown public fascination. By 3 p.m. on Christmas Day, the story had reached the desk of David Reed, Evelyn's COO. He was horrified both for his friend's privacy and for the company's image. He immediately called Evelyn. She had turned her phone off. He called security, who confirmed she was in the penthouse and safe but not answering the door. The fortress was sealed. At 4 p.m., the story reached the Metro City EMS headquarters. A Department Public Affairs officer saw the post and recognized the uniform. He pulled the dispatch log for Medic 14 from the previous night. He saw the wellness check call, the clear code, and then he saw the personnel log. Leo Vance had been signed out from the vehicle at 7:55 p.m. at the Aurora Tower, but he hadn't officially clocked out of the system until 11:30 p.m. from a location flagged as his home address. There was a 4-hour gap in the duty log for an on-duty paramedic at a private residence. It was a major breach of protocol. At 4:30 p.m., while Leo was helping Chloe assemble her new toys, his phone rang. It was Captain Susan Greeley, the head of his EMS battalion. Her voice was tense. "Leo, you need to come into the office, now, and bring your uniform jacket." The EMS headquarters on Christmas Day was a ghost town, which made the fluorescent lights in Captain Greeley's office feel even harsher. Leo sat in a hard plastic chair, the paper star still pinned to his jacket, feeling like a teenager called to the principal's office for a crime he couldn't quite define. Captain Susan Greeley was a 20-year veteran, a woman with a reputation for fairness but zero tolerance for protocol breaches that could expose the department to liability. She had the gossip forum post printed out on her desk. She tapped the photo with a rigid finger. "Start from the beginning, Leo, and do not leave anything out." Leo told her everything: the empty penthouse, the palpable despair, his decision to stay as a private citizen, bringing Chloe back. He emphasized that he was off duty, that he used no department resources, that it was a human impulse, not a medical one. When he finished, Greeley leaned back, her expression unreadable. "You understand that from the outside, this looks like abandonment of post at best, and at worst, a bizarre intrusion into a private citizen's life under the guise of your authority." "With all due respect, Captain," Leo said, his voice steady, "my authority ended when my partner cleared the call and left. What happened after was between 3 people on a hard night, one of whom just happened to be very, very famous." Greeley sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "The very, very famous part is the problem, Leo. This isn't a private matter anymore. It's a media cyclone. The department is now fielding calls from reporters. The city council liaison wants a briefing. Our liability insurance carrier has already sent an email. You're suspended, effective immediately, with pay pending a full disciplinary review." The word suspended hit Leo like a physical blow. His income, already stretched thin, now had a guillotine hovering over it. "For how long?" he asked, his throat tight. "Until the review board decides. And Leo," Greeley's tone softened a fraction, "take that star off your jacket before you leave the building." Across the city, inside her sealed penthouse, Evelyn Thorne was facing a different kind of inquisition. David Reed had finally gotten through to her via the penthouse's landline. On a secure video call, he laid out the crisis. The stock market was closed for the holiday, but the Asian markets would open in a few hours, and Etha's shares were traded internationally. The narrative of a mentally unstable CEO, fueled by the enigmatic photo, could trigger a sell-off. Evelyn, we need a statement. Now. A simple, firm denial. Say it was a mistaken identification or a private charity visit you arranged. Something, David pleaded, his face drawn with stress on the screen. Evelyn, still in the same cream sweater, stared out her window. The paper ornament still hung from her island. I won't deny it, David, she said quietly. Why on earth not? Because it was real. And it was the first real thing that has happened to me in this apartment in years. I won't call it a mistake or a charity case. They were guests. David looked like he wanted to throw his computer. Evelyn, be rational. This isn't about your personal feelings. This is about $11 billion of market capitalization. Investors do not invest in real moments. They invest in stability, in predictability. Then maybe they've invested in the wrong person, Evelyn replied, a new steel in her voice. She ended the call. She then did something completely out of character. She logged onto her long-dormant personal social media account, verified with a blue checkmark she'd never used. She took a photo of the paper star Chloe had made, now placed on her kitchen counter with the city lights blurring in the background. She wrote a single sentence as the caption. Sometimes the kindest rescue has nothing to do with sirens. Thank you, Leo and Chloe. A Christmas I will never forget. She tagged no one. She hit post. Then she turned her phone off again. The effect was instantaneous. Her post, coming from the reclusive CEO herself, didn't dispel the mystery, it validated it. It confirmed the photo was real. It confirmed the paramedic's name. And it framed the event not as a crisis, but as a moment of profound human kindness. The internet, perpetually starved for authentic good news, especially at Christmas, seized on it. The narrative began to pivot, slowly but irrevocably, from "what's wrong with the CEO?" to "what an incredible story of compassion." But the institution had its own momentum. The morning of December 26th, the Metro City Herald published a short, factual article titled "EMS Paramedic Suspended Following High-Profile Christmas Eve Incident." It cited unnamed sources within the department and framed the suspension as a routine response to a breach of conduct policies. For the public, now emotionally invested in the heartwarming Christmas story, this was a betrayal. The comment section exploded. "They're punishing him for being human," one top comment read. "He should get a medal, not a suspension." Another wrote, "This is why people hate bureaucracy. A man helps a lonely woman on Christmas and loses his job." A local radio talk show picked up the story, and the host spent an hour lambasting the EMS administration for being heartless robots. The public sentiment was now a tidal wave, and it was crashing directly against the EMS headquarters. Captain Greeley's office was flooded with calls and emails. City council members, sensitive to public opinion, began calling the fire commissioner, who oversaw EMS, asking for clarification. The disciplinary review was suddenly no longer an internal personnel matter. It was a political hot potato. On the afternoon of the 26th, Leo was called back in. This time, the fire commissioner, a tall, stern man named Robert Alden, was in the room. "Mr. Vance," Alden began, bypassing any pleasantries. "This situation is untenable. The department looks cruel, you look like a martyr, and the core issue of your conduct remains. We are proposing a resolution. You accept a formal written reprimand in your file, forfeit 2 weeks' pay, and are reinstated immediately. In return, the department will issue a statement saying the matter has been resolved internally, acknowledging the unique circumstances of the holiday." It was a deal designed to make the problem go away. Leo felt a surge of anger. "So I'm still punished for checking on someone who was clearly in distress. You're being penalized for violating clear operational protocols, Mr. Vance," Alden said firmly. "The why does not erase the what. Do you accept the terms?" Before Leo could answer, Captain Greeley's assistant rushed in, her face pale. "Commissioner, Captain, you need to see the lobby." They went to the window overlooking the main public entrance. A crowd had gathered, not a protest, but something stranger. Dozens of people, regular citizens, were leaving things on the steps. Single-wrapped presents, cards, bouquets of flowers. a large handmade sign that read, "Thank you, Paramedic Leo." The crowd was silent, respectful. They would approach, leave their item, and step back. It was a spontaneous public shrine to an act of kindness. A local news van was parked across the street, filming the whole thing. Commissioner Alden stared, his jaw tight. The problem was no longer just media. It was now a visual, emotional spectacle on his doorstep. "Who organized this?" he muttered. No one had. That was the power of it. Meanwhile, in the Ether Systems boardroom, a scheduled teleconference had turned into a crisis meeting. Several major institutional investors were on the line, demanding to know what the Christmas incident meant for leadership stability. David Reed was trying to hold the line, citing Evelyn's public post as evidence of positive public engagement. Then the chief financial officer dropped a bombshell. "I've been monitoring sentiment analysis and our brand affinity metrics since yesterday. They're up. Significantly, public perception of Ether as cold and impersonal has dropped 22%. Associations with humanity and community have spiked. Our social media mentions are at an all-time high, and 94% are positive." The room fell silent. The board had been prepared for a disaster. Instead, the data was telling them the inexplicable event was, by the cold calculus of public relations, the best thing that had happened to the company's image in years. One of the lead investors, an older woman with a gravelly voice, came over the speaker. "Well, it seems Ms. Thorne has accidentally stumbled upon a marketing masterstroke. The question is, what does she do next? Can she replicate this human connection?" Evelyn, listening from her penthouse, had heard enough. She unmuted her line. "This wasn't a marketing strategy," she said, her voice clear in the quiet room. "It was a personal moment, but it revealed something. Our company has a soul, or it can have one. I'm authorizing David to draft a proposal for a new corporate initiative, the Ether Community Resilience Fund. We'll partner with and fund first responder organizations, community outreach, and mental health support, specifically targeting holiday loneliness. We'll lead with this story." There was a pause. Then the same investor spoke. "Appropriate, and the paramedic, he's been suspended. That's a terrible look for us by association now." Evelyn had seen the news. A fire ignited in her gut. "Then we fixed that too," she said, and ended the call. On the morning of December 27th, two things happened simultaneously. First, a courier delivered a formal, sealed letter to the office of Fire Commissioner Robert Alden. It was on Ether Systems' letterhead, signed by Evelyn Thorne as CEO. It was not a threat. It was an offer. It expressed Ether's deep admiration for the Metro City EMS department and its personnel. It noted the company was establishing a new community resilience fund and wished to make its inaugural grant, a donation of $500,000 to the Metro City EMS, specifically for continuing education, mental health support for personnel, and community outreach programs. The letter concluded, "We hope this grant can, in some small way, honor the spirit of service exemplified by your paramedic, Leo Vance, whose compassion reminded our entire city of what truly matters." It was a check with impossible strings attached. Rejecting it would seem churlish. Accepting it would make suspending Leo look absurd. Second, Evelyn Thorne did her first-ever live television interview. She appeared via video link from her penthouse on the local noon news. She was composed, thoughtful, and startlingly honest. The interviewer asked the obvious question, "Ms. Thorne, why was a paramedic in your home on Christmas Eve?" Evelyn looked directly into the camera. "Because I was alone and I was sad." He recognized that. "He and his daughter showed me a simple, profound kindness that had nothing to do with my bank account or my job title. They treated me like a person." Leo Vance didn't see a CEO that night. He saw a human being who needed a friend. And in doing so, he didn't just save my Christmas. He reminded me, and I hope he reminds all of us, that our shared humanity is our greatest currency. The fact that his employer is punishing him for that is something I cannot understand and will not accept. It was a direct, public challenge to the EMS bureaucracy. The interview clip went viral globally. The pressure on Commissioner Alden was now absolute and coming from every direction. The weeping public on his steps, the politically savvy city council, the wealthy corporate donor offering a lifeline of good PR and $500,000, and the court of public opinion, which had squarely crowned Leo as a hero and the department as the villain. At 3 p.m., Alden and Captain Greeley called Leo into the commissioner's office for the third time in 2 days. Alden slid the letter from Etha across the desk. "Do you know anything about this?" Leo read it, his eyes widening. "No, sir, I didn't." Alden studied him, looking for guile and finding none. He let out a long, weary breath. "The written reprimand is off the table. The suspension is rescinded, effective immediately. You'll receive back pay for the days missed. The department will issue a statement praising your dedication and characterizing the event as a unique humanitarian gesture that, while outside normal channels, reflects the core values of EMS." It was a full, unconditional retreat. Leo should have felt vindicated. Instead, he felt numb. "And the grant," Alden's lips thinned. "The grant will be accepted with thanks. It seems your Christmas Eve call is now funding the department." The irony was thick enough to taste. Leo walked out of headquarters a free man, his job secure. The small crowd outside, which had grown, erupted into applause. He waved, forcing a smile, feeling like a fraud. The story had grown so big it had swallowed him whole. He was no longer Leo Vance, paramedic and dad. He was Paramedic Leo, the symbol. As he drove away, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. He answered. "Leo, it's Evelyn. I saw the news. I'm glad you're reinstated." Her voice was hesitant. "Thank you," Leo said, pulling over. "The grant, that was me refusing to let a good man be punished for a good deed," she finished. "But it's gotten out of hand, hasn't it?" Leo laughed, a short, tired sound. "You could say that. They're calling it the Christmas Eve miracle on the news." There was a pause. Then Evelyn said words that would change the trajectory of everything. "Then maybe," she suggested softly, "instead of being swallowed by the miracle, we should try to build one. For real. Will you meet me? There's something I want to propose." They met 3 days later, not in the penthouse, but in the community room of the Brenner Heights Public Library. It was Leo's suggestion, neutral ground, a place that belonged to everyone and no one. Evelyn arrived alone, wearing jeans and looking more uncertain than she ever did in a boardroom. Leo was already there with 2 cups of coffee from the cart outside. For a few minutes, they just talked like normal people. About Chloe starting back at school. About the surreal media storm that was finally, slowly dying down. Then Evelyn placed a simple folder on the table between them. "This is the preliminary proposal for the Etha Community Resilience Fund," she said. "But it's just words on paper. I want it to be real. And I don't know how to do that, not in a way that matters to actual people." Leo opened the folder. The financials were staggering, a $20 million endowment. The proposed areas of focus were exactly what she'd mentioned: first responder support, combating social isolation, mental health. It was impressive, and yet it felt distant, like charity from a great height. He closed the folder. "Can I ask you something? Why are you really doing this? Is it for the good PR to fix the company image?" Evelyn didn't get offended. She thought for a long moment. "The PR is a fortunate side effect. I'm doing it because for the first time in a very long time, I felt what it was like to not be a transaction, to be seen. I have a ridiculous amount of money, Leo. I can either build a higher wall with it, or I can try to build a longer table. I want to build the table, but I need someone who knows what the ground feels like to help me design it." That was the beginning of the most unlikely partnership in the city. Leo agreed to consult for the fund, not as a paid employee, but as a community advisor. His first condition was that the fund would not carry the Etha name prominently. It would be called the City Lights Resilience Fund, named for the view from the penthouse that night. His second condition was that the board would include actual paramedics, social workers, and community organizers, not just corporate executives. Evelyn agreed to everything. Over the next 4 months, the fund moved from concept to reality. The $500,000 grant to EMS was just the start. Leo worked with Captain Greeley to design a peer support mental health program specifically for first responders, addressing the staggering statistic that EMTs are 3 times more likely to suffer from PTSD and depression. The fund financed it entirely, including training and dedicated, confidential counselors available 24/7. For Captain Greeley, it was a professional vindication. A protocol breaker had somehow broken through the bureaucracy to get her people the help she'd been requesting for years. The second pillar of the fund targeted holiday loneliness, that silent epidemic affecting 14 million Americans. Instead of throwing a giant, impersonal charity gala, the fund created Neighbor Check, a citywide initiative that partnered with local libraries, churches, and community centers. It trained volunteers to recognize signs of isolation and provided simple, non-intrusive ways to connect, from friendly phone call programs to shared community meals on major holidays. The official launch event was held not in a hotel ballroom, but in the Brenner Heights Community Center. Evelyn Thorne stood at a simple podium, with Leo Vance and his daughter Chloe beside her. She told the story of that Christmas Eve, not as a polished anecdote, but with raw honesty about her loneliness and Leo's instinct to see through it. "This isn't about me," she told the packed room of local residents and reporters. "This is about recognizing that the person next to you on the bus, the neighbor you rarely see, the colleague who's always first in and last out, they might be carrying a silent weight. We built this fund not to fix people, but to connect them, because connection is the first, most vital form of care." The speech resonated deeply. Donations poured in from the public, matching Etha's seed money within 6 weeks. For Leo, life changed in profound but quiet ways. He returned to his paramedic duties, but now he also spent 8 hours a week at the fund's offices, reviewing grant applications from grassroots groups. The department, still wary of the spotlight, eventually recognized his unique position and created a new, part-time role for him, Community Liaison Officer. He became a bridge between the institution and the people it served. The suspension was erased from his record. More importantly, the extra income from the liaison role meant financial stability for the first time since Maria's death. He could save for Chloe's future. He could breathe. One afternoon, while reviewing applications, he found one from a small organization providing support for children who had lost a parent. He sat at his desk for a long time, then approved the grant for the maximum amount. Healing, he realized, could move in all directions. For Evelyn, the transformation was internal and seismic. She began attending the fund's community meetings, not as a keynote speaker but as a listener. She learned the names of local organizers. She had coffee with social workers. The Ice Queen persona melted away, replaced by a focused, determined woman who had discovered a problem more complex and rewarding than any quantum algorithm: human connection. Her leadership at Etha evolved. She initiated flexible work policies focused on mental health, citing the high cost of burnout she had personally paid. Company morale soared and productivity increased, proving her point to the board. She sold her penthouse in the Aurora Tower and bought a smaller, lived-in townhouse in a neighborhood with actual neighbors. David Reed, her COO, told a reporter privately, "It's like she's been unlocked. The genius is still there, but now it's connected to a heart. It's formidable." A year after that Christmas Eve, the city held a quiet dedication ceremony. A new state-of-the-art community response vehicle was unveiled at the main EMS station. It was not an ambulance for trauma, but a mobile unit staffed by a paramedic and a social worker, designed specifically for nonviolent mental health and wellness checks. Its call sign was Medic 14, in honor of Leo's unit. On its side was a simple logo, a stylized paper star, and the words "City Lights Resilience." At the ceremony, Captain Greeley handed the keys not to a high-ranking officer, but to Leo Vance and his new partner, a clinical social worker named Ben. "This is your rig," Greeley said. "Go do what you do best. See the person, not just the problem." As Leo climbed into the driver's seat for the first time, he found a small, laminated paper star tucked into the sun visor. On the back, in a familiar, elegant script, was written, "Never stop seeing." E. The story, which had begun as a scandalous mystery, became a case study in positive change. Other cities reached out to replicate the Neighbor Check model. Studies on the first responder mental health program showed a significant drop in stress-related leave. The fund, guided by Leo's ground-level perspective and Evelyn's strategic resources, had become a self-sustaining engine for good. But the most surprising detail, the one that never made the news reports, was the most personal. Every Sunday afternoon, Leo and Chloe would have lunch at Evelyn's townhouse. It was not a formal arrangement, not a charity case. It was just what they did. Chloe called her Auntie Ev. They would cook together, help Chloe with homework, and sometimes just sit in the backyard. It was normal. It was family, the kind you choose. One such Sunday, as Leo was washing dishes, Evelyn leaned against the counter next to him. "You know, I used to measure my life in quarterly earnings reports and patent filings," she said, watching Chloe draw at the kitchen table. "Now I measure it in these afternoons. It's a much better metric." Leo handed her a plate to dry. "Yeah," he said, smiling. "It really is." The narrative that had once asked how someone with everything could have nothing had found its answer. Everything meant nothing without connection. And from the most fleeting, fragile moment of connection, a paramedic's decision to stay, a child's paper star, an entire city had remembered how to reach out, how to build bridges across the deep canyons of wealth, status, and loneliness. The crisis of silence had been met not with a siren, but with a conversation, not with a bank transfer, but with a shared meal. The hero wasn't a billionaire or a paramedic, but the simple, courageous act of human kindness that refused to leave someone behind in the dark. And as the new Medic 14 rolled out on its first call, its mission was clear: to carry that light forward, one person, one connection at a time. So what remains, after the headlines fade and the social media storms quiet? What's left is the blueprint of a quiet revolution, one that started not in a boardroom or a Capitol building, but in the space between two people who chose to see each other as human beings first. Leo Vance still works the streets, but now he also teaches. He trains new paramedics that the most important tool in their kit isn't the defibrillator or the trauma shears, it's empathy. The willingness to look past the call code and see the person in crisis, whether that crisis is cardiac arrest or crushing loneliness. Evelyn Thorne still runs her company, but the metrics of success have expanded. Profitability is now balanced with purpose. Shareholder value shares the stage with shared humanity. The City Lights Resilience Fund has become a national model, proving that corporate capital and community wisdom can be powerful allies. This story exposed a painful, modern truth that the U.S. Surgeon General called an epidemic: that loneliness is a silent, chronic condition cutting across all lines of wealth, age, and status. It affects the billionaire in the penthouse and the retiree in the small apartment. But it also revealed the antidote. Connection is not a grand, complex gesture. It is a series of small, brave decisions. To stay when protocol says leave. To be vulnerable when your image says be invincible. To see need instead of nuisance. The legacy of that Christmas Eve isn't measured in millions of dollars donated, though that helped. It's measured in the hundreds of volunteers now making regular check-in calls through the Neighbor Check network. It's measured in the first responders who now seek help because a peer support program tells them it's a sign of strength, not weakness. It's measured in a city that was reminded of its own heart. We often mythologize heroes as those who perform extraordinary acts in extreme moments. But perhaps the more essential heroism is the ordinary courage to bridge the gap between us in our most ordinary moments. To ask, "Are you okay?" and mean it. To answer, "No, I'm not," and be heard. Leo and Evelyn's story asks each of us a simple question. In your own life, surrounded by your own routines and responsibilities, who have you left on read? Who is the person in your orbit sitting in their own version of an empty penthouse, waiting for a sign that someone sees them? The invitation they extended to each other is extended to all of us. Build a longer table, not a higher wall. Carry your light, however small it seems, into the dark corners. Because sometimes, the most profound rescue doesn't require a uniform or a siren. It just requires showing up and staying. If you believe that a single moment of human kindness can still change a life and change a city, then subscribe.